Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark, where we constantly remind you that love is greater than fear and happiness is resistance. Good morning. This is Lonnie Clark and Heidi Lambert with the Age of Fission radio show. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, having me, Lonnie.
We really appreciate all of our listeners, and I'm saying good morning, but it's actually Thursday evening when we're pre-recording this interview, so a lot of our conversation may be 2 days late from the time you're hearing this. We're not really live, but good morning. And our goal with the Age of Fission radio show is to let people begin to embrace the idea that we're living in a world that, hate to say it, but we are contaminated. My generation, I'm 63 years old, born in 1955. I feel younger than the number is, but the thing is, my generation was the first generation of people to be intentionally bombed by our world leaders. And it's not just the United States. The United States is the leading monster, but not really the only ones. I mean, every country bombs somebody. And then what happens is they found out after the fact. They didn't really understand it when they did all this bombing. But this stuff lasts for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's really here, and we are really only beginning to understand it. So there's no reason to fear it, because the scientific studies haven't really begun, because they have been so afraid of it, they're suppressing the science. Is that
that's a good way to look at it. I like that.
That is, in fact, exactly how I look at it. And I think that it's really important for us to understand that we don't have to be afraid about talking about nuclear contamination, because it doesn't mean we're going to die immediately. But we do need to talk about it, and especially now. Like, people are talking about how Trump is denying climate change. Well, guess what? The climate change activists are denying that radioactivity has caused any harm to the climate.
Yeah, they do. They think nuclear is an answer.
Right,
a lot of them.
Right. And the real reality is because no science. There has been no science. There's been a huge suppression of science. The whistleblowers will tell you about that. Or the people...
Well,
go ahead.
It's how you look at it, too, because the making of nuclear power is really cheap, and it is really effective. It's the storage of the waste that we really don't understand, because it's so long of a shelf life. You know, it's going to be around for a long time. So,
well, this is the hard part. We don't have containers that will hold it for as long as it's... I mean, the casks that we use in the United States. This is the big story that Donna Gilmore from SanOnofreeSafety.org talks about. And in fact, Donna Gilmore is a person that I'm dying to interview with you, Heidi, because I've interviewed her many times. As you've probably heard my interviews with Donna on
Oh, yeah. She's so interesting.
I had a radio podcast when I first started in this whole system of doing a radio show. And actually really caring, even knowing about radioactivity, to be honest. It sort of snowballed for me. Like, I have not been an anti-nuke activist all my life. It's only happened since like 2015 or 14. I went, what? This made me stand up straight. Let me put it to you that way. This is kind of shocking information. But the more I learn about it, the more I learn two things. It's everywhere. And frankly, the human body is super strong. We can learn to manage it through health and nutrition. And some people, yes, are going to be affected randomly, and we cannot help that. And what we need to do is have free health care so that people who are randomly affected can get health care. And we need free universities so that we have a lot of scientists to help us deal with the mega amounts of radioactive contamination that's on this planet.
I think it's kind of genetic. You know, like some people have genes that are more stronger for the mutation, or like the infants, and then other people's genetics aren't as strong. Because, you know, like around Hanford, a lot of people get cancer, but then there's some families that live and are fine. So
yeah, but you know what? That's just because that generation, this is the thing, Helen Caldecott says, we won't even know until 4 generations from now.
Right. Well, and then that's the other thing, too, right, to take into consideration. is the multi-generation influence, the 4 generation and the 7 generations. You know, we're only 4 generations in right now, for the most part.
Well, like now, I've read stories, or actually, they're not stories. There are medical reports from doctors that say in Chernobyl, many of the children, most of the kids there, like people can live there, but the children still have genetic birth defects like multiple fingers, heart defects. I mean, yes.
Oh, yeah, I read a study, and it was saying about the first generation will have one blue eye and one brown eye, or like multicolored eyes.
Or like that little boy in China who basically could see in the dark. Did you see that? He has super blue eyes. He was born with super blue eyes, but it turns out he's like 5 or 6 years old, and he's very sensitive to light. But he can see completely perfectly in the dark.
Oh, so that's interesting. The whole like sensory sensitivity thing, I think is really interesting with radiation, because people really don't know how it affects the mind yet. You know, we see so many like.
Yeah, but you know what? This is the catch-all about the radioactivity, Heidi, is that much of the symptoms and much of the things that causes like our DNA, like right now, they're unleashing 5G on us. That's radiation. The 5G is radiation. I personally have a 5G phone that I cannot wait to take back. I mean, I'm going to go get a 4G phone. I am going to pay an extra $25 a month. Because I can't, you know how these phone systems are. You pay the phone off over 24 months. You can return it within 24 hours or something like that. I've had it for a month and a half, and I freaking hate it because it burns my hands.
Well, I went to a seminar just last weekend on safety for kids, and it was talking about devices, and it was saying that the phones should never be in a kid's room or any person's room, because of the radiation from the battery.
You mean this cell phone at night should be put outside my door?
Yeah, you should not be sleeping with your phone in your room.
Wow.
It's not healthy, because that's like 8 hours, 10 hours, and an ideal world would be 10 hours a night, but you know, you're in my world, it's like 6 hours a night. But
well, I know that when I'm working, I never have my cell phone near my desk. Like during office hours for me, because I'm super old school. I have a business, and I go into my office, and my cell phone is not turned off, but it's in the other room. I do not answer it. I don't text. I don't answer my phone. If people want to call me, they call me at work. Yes,
I think that's cute, Lonnie, because like that's so old school. Because so many people's jobs are online. You know, like that's another spin on it, you know, is how much we work on the computer, you know.
Is your job
online? That's my problem with my job. I work
like a lot. This is why I think I like this thing about Fukushima. When Fukushima happened, that's what changed my life. Fukushima, I can guarantee you, Fukushima fundamentally changed my entire perspective on living. Up until Fukushima happened, and not even when it happened, until I had that nightmare. I think it was May 5th, 2012. I had a nightmare about Hanford. I saw the whole sky orange. And I went to the internet, and I realized Hanford's fine, but Fukushima's still out of control. And I went, what? And
see, that's so funny you say that, though. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead. Please do interrupt me.
Well, I'm just interrupting because when Fukushima happened, most of the filters and all of the sensors, they turned off at Hanford.
Wow.
They turned them off because the levels were higher than Fukushima.
Well, but let me put it this way. The only reason I've thought about Hanford is because Fukushima happened 2011, right? Right? I think it was right before then Helen Caldicott came up to the Northwest. Or right shortly after. And I honestly, they had her come on April 15th, and I'm like, I can't go to that. So I really didn't know about radioactivity. I had been hearing it. This was my experience. Louisa Hamachek was organizing a nonprofit. She's a very strong anti-nuke activist who has been starting and stopping different projects to try to find something that sticks. Let's put it to you that way. Like, there's a lot of things she keeps trying. She wants people to realize, like, how dangerous Columbia Generating Station is. And so she was talking to me about it, the proximity factor, like how close Hanford is to Columbia Generating Station. So she got that is a really concerning thing. I mean, she's right. You know, if we have an earthquake, we're going to be really in a bad shape, the entire planet. It's not just the Northwest. It's everybody on the entire planet. It is a stupidly crazy, undersided thing that the United States government did that is threatening the entire planet by keeping the Columbia Generating Station open. Any day. It needs to be shut down yesterday because
there's no reason.
My last interview, this is interesting. I was on UCY.TV for 2.5 years, from 2013 until Jules had a mega medical event that happened to her body, and she had to close down the station because she was just working herself to the bone. She needed to stop. My last interview, I had been calling Hanford Challenge for every few months, maybe 6 months, asking for an interview with Tom Carpenter, but he was always involved in a case, was too busy, we kept missing each other. Finally, we get an interview. He happened to be my very last interview on UCY.TV. Tom Carpenter from Hanford Challenge. And I asked, and this was 2.5 years after I'd been doing it, and I asked him directly, do you think that my statement, when I say that we have a serious statement that if Columbia Generating Station has even a mild nuclear meltdown and we have to close it down for 2 weeks, that we are going to have a worldwide catastrophe because some of the tanks at Hanford that need to be churned 24 hours a day will go left unchurned for over 3 days, could potentially blow up into a 100,000-year fire.
Heck yeah.
That's exactly what he did. He said, you know what? You're exactly right. That could very potentially happen.
It's so vital. It's just waiting to happen.
It's logic. I'm not a nuclear... I mean, this is why I like you on my show, Heidi, because I'm not a scientific person. Like, I don't think scientifically, like, I get it on a...
Well, you don't have to be a scientific person. They make it seem like you have to be a scientist, but you don't have to be a scientist. But there is some science. I mean, of course, there's science involved, but it's just a common knowledge too, right? I mean, it's just such common knowledge. If you're going to experiment and mess with the atom and not know what's going to happen, that maybe you should quit making it until you figure that out.
That's what John Goffman said. John Goffman said, look, he was a very big pro-bomb person. He believed in the nuclear bomb.
That's how I was raised. It saved the world.
Right, and John Goffman believed it until he died. Like, you know what? We may not like what it does, but in terms of deterrence, yeah, we need it. But he also told the American government, do not use this as an energy source until you figure out what to do with the waste, because this, and this happens to the human body. And that is what is going to happen, whether you like it or not.
Right. But that's what's frightening, is it's also a medicine. So we have the dilemma of the waste, but now we're seeing it as a shape of medicine where they're using it to cure the causes of radiation, you know? And so that's a whole science that's new and being explored, and that's saving lives. So people have a hard time arguing with that happening because it saves lives. Some people, in all defense, refuse chemotherapy because, you know, they've seen it wreck people too. You know, I have a hard time having my own opinion on chemotherapy.
Oh, I'm totally against it. I do not believe in it.
Yeah, see? So there you go. I mean, like, some people are, like, totally against it. Some, like myself, I've seen it kind of save...
It saves people for how long? Every person who has chemotherapy has a recurrence of it 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years later.
Oh, and it's also so hard on your liver in itself, you know.
It
like
kills
it
your
just
body. Like, you don't give yourself the poison to get over the poison. It's
a sad reality that is the solution right now, though. That is the path.
Well, that's the same. Heidi, we could get into this whole conversation about the American medical healthcare system. I mean, it's a ridiculous statement of facts. It's not health care. It's disease care. It's assets on a balance sheet. It's not about... the American Medical Association absolutely refuses to acknowledge chiropractic, kinesiology.
No, and Lonnie, I agree. But also, just like growing up next to Hanford, and that there was this radiation everywhere, and people were sick everywhere, but there wasn't health care, and it was really hard to get health care, and I'm sure it still is now today. I mean, I have a friend who had this poor girl. She had a tumor on her nose for 2 years. It took her 2 years to get this tumor removed, and people with all kinds of different thyroid cancers and all kinds of different illnesses, and there is no medical...
Wow, what'd you do? Your sound said just dramatically improved.
I just changed phones. My phone was dying. I'm so sorry, everybody, for listening to a bad phone.
That's all right, but that sounds way better. Thank you, Heidi.
Well,
we'll start out on this phone from now on. How about that?
Damn radioactive batteries.
Exactly. This is the thing, like... I am not afraid of the radio. I mean, I have this in my, and in the outro, what they call on our show, the ending of our show. I don't know how many people listen to it, but I used to have it on the intro, and I just decided I don't want this big, long intro into our show. That's why I cut it short, but I have it on the outro. But I say, happiness is resistance, and love is greater than fear. And I think that's our greatest thing that we get to have. Is we have each other, and the human body is so strong, and we can get all freaked out about the level of contamination, but it is here. And my point is, let's stop making it. Let's just stop. Even if we just put it on a tabular hold for 15 years, just shut down every nuclear power plant. Develop a remediation industry. Like, put money into science.
That would be them admitting that they don't have the answers.
They don't have the answers. It's really obvious. They're killing the planet.
They do, and they tell you they do. They tell you, like, everything's safe, everything's under control, everything's contained. And they give you this feeling like there's all these guards watching these places, and it's just very safe, and it's not. That's part of our illusion or our delusion. And that's also where I'm at with denial. Like in the Tri-Cities, when I grew up there, the culture, or even as an adult there, the culture is everything's fine. Everyone, the smart people are in charge. And I think that's what needs to be questioned. And it doesn't have to be that we have to just be like, shut it down, because if you shut it, the thing is you can't shut it down, right? The waste is in the ground right now, and it's going to be there for thousands of years. So there's no shutting that down. And the CGS part,
it's not only in the ground, it's in the air also. And Fukushima is pouring it. Fukushima, Chernobyl, and Sellafield. Those are the three names people need to know.
Right, because they're active accidents. But I've had people from Japan, from Fukushima, in eastern Washington, and they've said to me, like, where's the evacuation zone? Where's the, red zone? And there is no accident there. There was never an accident at Hanford. So there is no, clear zone. You could call the reservation the clear zone, but people still work on it. People still drive heavy machinery out there and build roads and pipes and clear cement. And do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but don't they wear protective masks and things to help them breathe and stuff?
I think that's part of Tom Carpenter's mission, is the fact that no, they don't. I think that
wait a minute, the company, you're telling me, wait. You were telling me that CM2H Hill does not give every subcontractor a face mask to wear?
No. At CH2M Hill or Bechtel or Lockheed Martin or whoever, Exxon Nuclear, we can go on and on. They all bid for different jobs at Hanford, and they each have like 2-year contracts. And in that 2-year contract, they're in charge of the safety of their own employees. And so that's where that whole whistleblowing movement has come forward, because so many people were hired to be a pipe fitter and would go out there and pipe fit from one tank to another tank and not be wearing the right masks and not wearing the right gear because the company's trying to save money. And the employee doesn't want to say anything because then they know that they'll be fired. And then they won't be able to get a job. And so there's this fear factor of trying to keep your job because they usually pay very well.
That's so insane. Like, that is so cruel, because the additional cost of giving them face masks is incidental, a few dollars a day.
But it goes back to, by them giving safety gear is implying the employee's not safe. So if they don't give people gear and they don't train them and they send them out like they're going out into the middle of the desert.
Yeah, but it is not safe.
It's invisible.
This is where I think we need to have this truth and reconciliation thing. We need to say, yes, this is probably the most dangerous site on the planet for your safety. But we need brave Americans to do it.
I don't think that people who work at Hanford don't want people to know that they're working. I have a story for you, Lonnie.
Wait a minute. You're saying that people at Hanford... Okay.
No, I have to tell you the story. I have to tell you. So I live out in the Tri-Cities, and my husband and I have a farm, and we're farming, and we're having babies, and I meet this like really nice woman, and she's having her baby too, and we become friends. And we learned that they moved here from the East Coast. And they moved here from the East Coast because her husband's father owned a huge construction business. And her husband had gone to college so that he could take over his dad's construction business. But Bechtel hired him to come to the Tri-Cities to work on the world's largest construction project. And so he came out and got a job and worked in Eastern Washington and had no idea that it was a nuclear waste site. None at all.
Oh my
he was
God.
told he was building a thing called a VIT plant, a vitrification plant, and all of these things about this. But he really, truly didn't understand what it was for, and he didn't understand why it was there. I mean, he was some sort of... I think he was a purchaser for safety. He was like a supplier, and he supplied the place. And he didn't even know where he was or what he was doing there.
You know what?
And I think that's
in his defense,
mentality.
I can understand, because you know what? I was born in Los Angeles. I mean, literally, I was born at Los Angeles Hospital. I grew up in La Puente, in Hacienda Heights, right next to La Puente on the map. I drove down to San Diego when I grew up. My sisters, we grew up in Hacienda Heights. Some of my sisters moved down to San Diego when we grew up. I drove down there back and forth, and I would drive past the 405 freeway, past the San Onofre nuclear power plant. I, honest to God, never in my life knew it was a nuclear power plant. I thought it was a military observatory, because that's what it looked like. It had like a big round dome. From what you could see from the freeway, it looks like a big round dome. And I thought, well, that's a perfect place to have an observatory, is right on the coast in San Diego, because it's super beautiful blue nights. You can see the sky. It never occurred to me that was a nuclear power facility until
that makes me feel better.
After Fukushima, when I started paying attention to nuclear stuff.
Yeah, no, that's so for me. This is so embarrassing. I hate to admit this. I'm only admitting this because you just shared this, because I grew up at the Tri-Cities. My dad was a freaking nuclear engineer, right? He designed weapons there, and he moved us away, and all he could say was horrible things about the place. And as an adult, I had an opportunity to move back and have really cheap housing. And so I was like, no, because there's a nuclear waste in the, the reactor there. And everybody told me, oh, no, that's been shut down. Oh, they're cleaning that all up. Everything's fine. It's all shut down. And then after we moved, I started seeing the steam rising out of the earth. And I was like, wait a minute, isn't that the reactor? And still people were telling me, oh, no, it shut down. And it took like a year for me to get confirmed that the Columbia Generating Station was a true thing and actually working.
Wow. You know, the sad part is, in Europe, they have many nuclear power plants. You know why their people are healthier than they are in the United States from it? In Europe, it's from the notification. In Europe, their governments mandate that they tell the people that once a year when they're going to clean their equipment, when they're going to change it, because for 24 hours every year, every nuclear power facility absolutely must replace its major components. And they do that because they have to for safety's sake. And they do it. In our country, they don't tell us. They aggregate the risk throughout the year. So what happens is, in Europe, they are mandated to tell their people. And they send out notices 3 weeks beforehand and say, keep your children inside for the next month and a half after this date when we're doing it. Stay inside for 24 hours. Do not go outside. Walk as little as possible. If you're very sensitive, if you have allergies, seal up your windows for 48 hours. Be very careful for the next 2 weeks. Do not go outside. And their population is 100% healthier than ours because of the nuclear contamination. There are things you can do. We need a change of culture in our country, and that is my big hot button. We need people to actively engage and say, wait a minute, stop lying. Tell us what works, because things do work with this type of contamination. You can live with it. We have to live with it, because guess what? It is here. And there are things...
Well, they would have to put out warnings like every time it rains, Well, that's how I feel.
Exactly. Like, and people need to know that keep the rain off of you. Do not drink the rain. Like, that is a really important thing, as much as you can. And get a water filter and a shower filter. These are simple things that you can do. Filter your water. And if you live near a nuclear power facility, pay attention. If you're within 25 miles of a nuclear power facility, pay attention to the nuclear alerts on the NRC website. And really, at their website, on their website, they're required to tell you what happens on a daily basis. So if you wait for the NRC doesn't tell you for 2 or 3 days. So that
you need to consider like different places other than just nuclear sites, like hospitals and colleges, like universities. True. I know the University of Oregon has a huge nuclear science program.
Actually, you know what? Matt Holstrank has photos of daisies around the building near that nuclear facility that are double-headed daisies. Like mutated daisies.
Yeah, I've seen that. And that happens in the Tri-Cities, too.
But you see, this is what the nuclear industry says. Well, it's just double-headed. It's just you. So what if your kids are born with 5 fingers? Who cares? They're still human beings. This is the thing, like with the component about the 5G, though, Heidi. Like 5G, have you seen what happens to water when you hook up a 5G current to water?
No, I can imagine.
Oh, I will tell you what happens. You know how a water falls out of a spigot and it pours down straight? You hook your 5G current up to a water spigot, it goes zigzag.
Yeah.
So imagine what it does to a human being with 90% water in our body.
Oh, yeah.
And this is why it's easy to control our brains on the 5G, because our brains are going haywire. The 5G is just as bad as... this is the thing. It's all radiation. It's almost like they're leaning in. My friend Tom Ackerman, who I have interviewed on my radio show here, he thinks it is actually extermination. He believes that 100%.
Well, sometimes I lean towards that as well.
Do you really?
They know what they're doing. Well, they know what they're doing. Like the Green Run, when they purposely radiated the whole Northwest to study what happened. Yeah, and like Bikini Island, they knew what was going on when they let those people go home. So part of me feels like, and quite honestly, Japan, poor Japan, like we bombed them and then we sold them a bunch of freaking generators. That
we didn't sell them. We forced them on them. They did not have a choice. Let's be clear.
Yeah, it was awful. Right. However, it went down.
To be honest, it's quite an abusive, seriously narcissistic. I mean, when you look at the overall picture of it, it's extremely narcissistic because we win over them and then we force them to take the very thing that's going to kill them. And then when they get sick, we tell them, no, you have to pretend like it's all okay. That's what they've done now. In Japan, they have the secrecy law. They have journalists in jail for trying to tell the truth about nuclear contamination. In Japan, post-Fukushima, you're not allowed to say, my child has... Doctors have signs up, the hospitals have signs that say we no longer test for nuclear contamination.
Right. Well, that's how it feels in the Tri-Cities. In the Tri-Cities, even when you do get cancer, they're like, oh, blame the farmers. They use too much, pesticides, or they use too much, glyphosate.
Okay, so you know what? This gets into this tonight. The whole thing about the chemical thing. So we said this at the beginning of the interview that we're really recording this on Thursday evening. I went to a protest downtown in Eugene, Oregon tonight. It's the No One is Above the Law protest put on by MoveOn.org.
Yeah. On my way home on 101, I saw that. I was surprised because I didn't hear about it. So there was 100 people in Newport. There was signs. It was awesome.
To be honest, it was pretty awesome, but everybody is so upset that nothing is happening about Donald Trump's obvious lies. I mean, this thing about them firing Jeff Sessions, this is like, it's not just firing Jeff Sessions. It's his contentious way. It's very Pinochet-esque, right? Like, when are the Democrats going to stand up? So after what I said, turns out I was the last speaker tonight.
The woman with the last word.
The woman with the last word. My thing was about, we have to lean into it. Yes, there are oligarchs. But guess what? It's up to us. We have to call and talk to our politicians and force them to really press in for this information. And call Nancy Pelosi and say, yes, impeachment is on the table. And it's up to us to find out, like, it looks like it should be on the table. So let's get out there and demand these investigations. We don't have clear information because so far we've only had the GOP. So this is my thing. After the elections have been won in the House, I do honestly have confidence in the Democratic leadership to request the information to find out what the facts are. Right?
Well, so I agree with you, but I do know, if we're going to use this as a metaphor to the nuclear science history, is that facts get submersed and hidden and just burned, and the people on top just fire the people who question them and replace them with people who won't. And that's what's happening now with our judicial system with Trump. I mean, the way that the government has handled nuclear science since the 1950s. I mean, in the 1950s, it was tell no one anything and do what you want. And then when in the 70s, when people were dying and asking for explanations and asking for accountability, they got the proof that they did get radiated, but still there was no accountability. And by the time that they fought for the accountability, most of the people died.
Right.
And then there was nothing even then. And then there's my generation that comes in now at the 70s and the 80s, who I was raised with fishermen and hunters and people who lived off the land and farmers.
No, Heidi. You know what? It's not just that. I'm going to tell you this. You lived in a state whose state constitution says we have a right to clean air and water.
Yeah, but that's not what we got.
But we do have that more. Let me put it to you this way. In Oregon, this is one of the things I learned in democracy school. The fact is, this is how Newport won the court case to not be aerial spraying, is because the Constitution of Oregon is one of the very few states who says we have a right to clean air and water. That is huge hurdle.
So that might be true, Lonnie, in Oregon, but in Washington, they don't have that. And so Washington is where it's so radioactive, and it comes down into Umatilla, and it's interesting, too, because there's like a 30-mile, like, I don't know, they don't call it an evacuation zone, but it's like a hot zone from Hanford, and it goes into Umatilla. Wow. And one time I met with a senator from Oregon who told me that they bought Umatilla because they knew that land was useless. And so they bought it then to put their own chemicals on to at least get some federal money for having a waste fill. Wow. And they brought their own. Because I don't know if you've ever been to Umatilla Depot. I think that's what they call it. Oh, it's so gross.
Why would I go there?
Often. It's like, well, it's a highway. You go through the highway.
Where's it at?
To get... Umatilla is in eastern northern Oregon, and it's the way that you go to Pendleton and to go to Idaho. So it's like a way to head east. And it's a way to go up to if you were to go from Portland to the Tri-Cities, you'll go through Umatilla. Okay. But if you don't know where you are, it just looks kind of like a desert. But then if you focus in, you start to notice that they're all buried like caskets. I don't know how else to call it. It's chemical caskets. Wow. For years, Lonnie, they burned war chemicals there. Wow. It's such a contaminated place.
Wow.
So,
well, this, you know what's interesting to think about, Heidi? In my view, when you tell me this history that I'm like stunned about, I actually wonder what they're doing now. Like, I'm sure it's way worse, to be honest. Like, there's no regard at all now. I mean, this is, in a way, this last election where the Democrats won the House, at least we are going to have a little bit of
checks and balance.
Yes. The Constitution, like, let's see what you're doing. Let's hold you accountable. It's like you tell us what it is you're doing, and no. I mean, I'm not as hopeful as you, Lonnie. I'm more skeptic. I'm more I believe that people do what they do for money, and I think that nuclear science... No. But you know what? No. Like, let's forget that. Forget that. That's their paradigm. Forget that. You know what our paradigm is? Love is greater than fear. Happiness is resistance. And you know what? Money does not mean cash value.
Luckily, money, happiness to you and I. That's why I've never worked there. But I have gone to different, not trials, but what do they call it? Public, I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting the names of it right now. But they open up, they call it a tri-party agreement. They have these meetings. And I've gone to lots of these meetings for Hanford.
So this is why I was rushing out. Remember I said earlier how I was like almost grabbed the mic because I couldn't help to get home. So I was like, really, and my speech was like, yeah, well, I've tried to call Ron Wyden's office and I get nothing but blah, blah, blah. I said that on the speech, right?
Right.
So I hand the microphone to this lady and I'm coming down the stairs. And this woman, she's like, well, what do you mean? I've worked for Ron Wyden for 20 years. Her name is June. And I'm like, really? And I started engaging her. But then a woman who had been on earlier from Our Revolution, from Bernie's Revolution, who feels super bitter, she was like all about the glyphosate or some stupid chemical that's in our water from like blah, blah. Like, let's be honest.
Yeah, the GMO thing, right?
Okay, so whatever it is, like what, this is my thing. We're contaminated.
Because the reality is, though, you and I, like, I get upset about that because I feel like instead of companies taking responsibility for their actions, they tell their employees to take responsible for their actions.
That's typical narcissistic abuse. This is what I mean.
Right.
As abuse.
So it's like we could cut oil and we can cut glyphosate. Like we could eat the best diets, and we're still breathing our air and drinking our water, and our food is still growing in our soil. So like until the soils are clean, the air is clean, and the water is clean, everything else is contaminated.
Exactly. Until we get the science. This is what I mean. Like, we really need to dig into spending money on education. We need our children to be educated. We need nuclear scientists. We need chemical scientists, physicists, people who understand this stuff. Not to pump us up with fake chemicals, but how to, like, honor the body, honor our planet, how to remediate.
That's so holistic. It's such a holistic thing that whoever takes those jobs has to be so interdisciplinarian. And when you become a nuclear scientist, you only know math. I mean,
no, but this is the point is here, Heidi. We need a different culture in the nuclear industry. We need a revolution. We need scientists to be free. We need to stop the AMA from controlling health and making people ill. The whole Western medicine, the whole idea that humans are assets on a balance sheet has just got to, it's antithetical to life. We cannot just look at every tree on the planet as a profit margin. I mean, we have to change our relationship with how we look at things. And this is why, like, I want to interview, who are the people you want to interview? I want to interview Tom Carpenter. These are my wish lists. I want to interview Levi Halevi, Tom Carpenter, Nancy Faust, Donna Gilmore, Dave Parrish, oh my gosh, there's one more, Chris Busby, and I do want to interview Sean. Do you know Sean? I don't think you know Sean, though. Sean McGee from nuclearnews.net. He's Irish, but I've interviewed him several times. I don't think you know him personally, but I would love for you, because he's pretty scientific, like you would speak his language. He's very kind to me because I ask him the most, he says things to me 3 or 4 times. He's like, oh yes, we talked about this before.
Right. And you're like, well, I'm still processing.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah. So anyways, who's your wish list?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Beyond that, Helen Caldicott?
Well, of course, Helen's always great to talk to. And like, I love talking to Nick Longi.
Who's that, Nick Longi?
He works at the University of Oregon. He's a professor. And he did this really great study where he tied in, like, everybody in Japan who worked with Fukushima had a connection to another board of directors at either another bank or a power company or a different university. He does this, like, cool web study of how everybody's connected to each other, and it was really intriguing to meet him and talk to him about that. But who else would I want to talk? Well, and, like, Mimi Gurman, she's fun. That would be a good one. And
for sure. Well, Mimi's doing a lot of good work with people that are houseless, and she's very aware on the nuclear issue, and she's really tuned into how to make cities work. Like, that's what she's making an effort to do, is make Portland more of an equitable city.
Well, yeah, because that's where it makes a difference, you know?
That's the thing. This is what I think. Like, we need to get actively engaged, and people need to, like, make their voice heard. That's my big thing. We have about 5 minutes left, but that's my ending message. And this is why I do this radio show. I mean, I know the show is airing early in the morning, but I want to inspire people, even like kids that are 10, 12, 13 years old, like, get engaged. Like, you can contact your mayor and find out what's on the menu, because, like, what's going on at your school, like how they fund your school, that matters. Make your voice known. Like, if you think you need more desks in your room, or I mean, I personally object to having students on the computer all day. I think that is an outrage. I have
Well, if people want us to interview people, who do they email? What email do
well,
they have?
I mean, at the end of the show, it says ageoffission@gmail.com. And that's that's for the age. I own that. So people can.
Ageoffission at
gmail.com.
gmail.com. And then they just email us with who they think we should interview.
Yeah, just send me a suggestion.
I'll interview anybody.
And tell me how to get in touch with them if you know how to do it. You know what I mean? If you're like a personal contact, that's called a warm referral. If I can say, oh, so-and-so said blah, 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 you'd be great to interview. That means they know you and they like you, Or if you don't know them, you can say, interview them. I don't know them, but I think they'd be great. And I'll say, hey, one of my fans, because thank you for being our fans, suggested that we should call you and we want to interview you, because our goal is to get people whose voices are not heard on the radio. That's actually the super cool thing. This is why I am involved with KEPW. The mission statement, if people went to kepw.org and read the mission statement, I am going to plug the radio station right now, because honestly, I love these people and I love their ideals. KEPW's mission statement is to give voice to all the unheard voices that can't even get on NPR. Because there are people, this is why Amy Goodman has some people who doubt her. Because she is somewhat controlled, because she's so big now. There's no choice. She has to comply if she wants to be on the air.
Right. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, we have to comply too. There's compliances to be on the air. But at the same time, I do this so people know that they can be on the air and talk their truth, because I was always raised to be afraid of talking this truth. I have a really good friend who was like, oh, it's really too bad that you just believe crazy people. And I was like, wow, you think I believe the crazy people? Because really, I'm one of them. Like, nobody taught me what to believe about Hanford. This is my own accumulation of my own history. You know what I mean? It's not like someone told me nukes were bad. That's my own understanding of how they've managed it. I've watched it for 40-some years, mismanaged, and totally making huge mistakes, and then not even taking accountability for the mistakes that they've made. So I feel like that's what the most important part is just speaking your truth of what you've seen or experienced or what you know is true. About this whole, I call it a greed cycle. You're a little more hopeful than I am, but I feel like it's driven by greed. I feel like if people weren't interested in money, then they would see the truth way more clearly about it. But
at a certain point, money is not going to matter. This is the thing. This is why love is greater than fear. Money is fear-driven.
Yeah, it is.
Love is life-driven. It's not heart-driven. It's life-driven. What drives us is our love for life.
Right, and our attachments.
Well, it's not just I don't believe it's our attachments. I think it's really just like, at a certain point, we really get it. Like, it is an honor to be alive and to experience each other and have our relationships and just to feel the beautiful. This is why people who get so despondent, all of us go through that. That's the beautiful thing about life. Every living creature goes through these feelings of feeling utter desperation, like we feel like we're never going to get through it. But the fact is, we do, and when you come to the other side, it's such a much greener side than you could have ever imagined. If you come through it with love. That's why I say love is greater than fear. Because really, we have the capacity for deep, harsh, we can weather deep storms together. Humans are very deep creatures.
You're so hopeful, and I love that about you, Lonnie. I do. But there's a part of me that feels like there's also room for denial,
Well, it's not just denial. The fact is there's millions of, I don't know about you, but I follow a few psychics, and all of them say the same thing. It's everything the climate scientists are saying. In 100 years or 200 years, we're going to have massive, massive death. humanity is going to suffer severely. And boom. It's a matter of how quick. It's coming. We know we are having an extinction level event. We see it with the animals. You can go to End Times. It's called, all you have to do is look for mass animal deaths. It's kind of sad. Like, I used to report on it on my show all the time, and it's kind of hard. Like, when I had nobody to interview, that's what I would do. Let's go to mass animal deaths and see what's here. 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's go, folks.
Like, sense of humor.
I mean, it's kind of sad, but when you reflect on it, like, it's going to happen to us. Like, and in fact, it is. We have famine in Yemen. We have severe famine in the United States. People are dying in our own country. It's sad. And we see it in here in Eugene, Oregon. Like, I don't know about you where you live, but we see a lot of homeless people living on the edge.
Oh, yeah. These rainy nights, long, cold, rainy nights outside, no shelter, and all that money that goes to run these reactors and to cast this waste, it could be feeding people with so many bowls of soup, like 50 million bowls of soup. But instead, we're totally locked into this commitment, this financial commitment to this waste that these people made. I had no idea what they made and how long it will last.
Oh, they know how long it's going to last. Look, I think they know the science. I think they know quite well the science. I think they are very versed at deciding to all deny together. Because the reality is this, it's out there. If I can find out the truth, you think they don't know the truth? Come on. Like, for
I don't
real?
know, man. I think it's narcissist. The narcissist made they just can't think beyond themselves, and they're the ones that made this science happen. And then it keeps getting managed by more narcissistic, pedophile-like kind of people where they just kind of rape. And so,
well, this is why we need the truth. This is why we need a truth. What do they call that? A Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where people just say, okay, we recognize that if we don't come clean, we're all going to die. So let's just come clean, tell you the truth. We knew we screwed up. We're sorry. We'll help you the best we can. And then we don't have to deny anymore. And people get free health care. If you're sick, your kids are sick, you get free health care. Our children get to go to school, so we have a bunch of nuclear scientists that can actually do the job of figuring out how to keep humanity alive. I mean, I'm all good with that.
I'm good with that. It's a very beautiful idea, and I hope they fund it, because instead it's just like a big waste of money to me.
You won't. I mean, this is what I want. They can still make a boatload of money. The reality is they're still going to make a lot of money. It's still a money cash cow. It's still a cash
job
cow.
Security, right? For thousands of years.
I mean, for real, it's kind of like, this is why I have this idea, because in my business, I do tax resolution, right? I don't create the problem, but I certainly help people who have to suffer the discomfort of it. It's kind of like I'm a remediation company. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I help you figure it out. That's what we need with the nuclear industry. We need them to build a whole. And as a taxpayer, I would 100% prefer that than we continue on the venue of nuclear destruction for the entire planet, because a mild nuclear war, which is where they're thinking they're going to go because they have them, why not use them, is suicide. And no thanks. I like our babies to look like 2 arms and 2 legs and cute little faces who learn and grow up and be sweet little people. That's what I prefer.
Well, that's what I prefer too.
And so that's my thing. I hope that we can actually get there.
Well, on that note, Lonnie, I think we've filled an hour of our intent of hopefully people being honest and coming clean and not continuing the deceptions.
And for people to not be afraid of it, because actually we're stronger than we think, and we do have a lot more power. So let's just be ourselves and assert who we are, and be ourselves and actively engage in our culture and our civilization and our society. Let's be adults. When you come of age, become voter age, if you're in a democracy, you actively engage and you find out what the issues are in your area and you get involved. Pick something. Good. And so if you're listening to this show, we're hoping you're picking the Columbia Generating Station and calling Pete DeFazio and Ron Wyden and saying we want to close the Columbia Generating Station, and Jeff Merkley saying we want to close the Columbia Generating Station.
Shut it down, Patty Murray.
Shut it down, Patty Murray. Maria Cantwell. Exactly. Okay, well,
cool.
Look, you guys.
Take care, Eugene. Take care, world.
Okay, bye, Heidi. We will talk to you next week. And put your courage feet on, you guys. And remember, love is greater than fear. And happiness is resistance. Bye, Heidi.
Bye.
The Age of Fission radio show brings you book readings, pertinent articles, interviews with both activists and victims of nuclear and environmental contamination. We strive to deliver only the facts from reliable sources. We want to remind you that love is greater than fear, and happiness is resistance. Our dedication to love and happiness paves the road for innovation and healing. As we face our harsh reality, let us hold each other up and rejoice in our humanity. If you want to comment, please send your thoughts to ageoffission@gmail.com. That's AGEOFFISSION @gmail.com. To your host, Lonnie Clark.